Okay, so 2 days ago we made a video talking about the possibility of the Montreal Canadiens trading away their first-round pick at the 2020 draft. The pick is 16th overall. There were reports coming out from Marc Bergevin talking about how apparently the Habs would actually be very open to making a deal if they were able to get a package for a very good top six roster forward who can score goals. But on the flip side, we still have a discussion to have when it comes to the draft pick itself, in the scenario that the Canadiens don't actually trade it. So in this video, a few days before the actual 2020 NHL Entry Draft, we're taking a look at three guys who apparently, according to sources, the Canadiens really like. So just for some background before we actually get into the discussion over here, the Habs were one of the worst teams in the regular season. They were like 8th last or something like that. Regardless, though, they're actually going to be picking 16th overall because they eliminated Sidney Crosby and the Penguins in the play-in series for the 2020 playoffs, eventually made the first round, and they lost to the number 1 seed Philadelphia Flyers, but that's okay because they exceeded expectations, they actually made the dance, and because they were there, they ended up dropping in the draft rankings from 9th overall, which was their selected pick before they made it into the playoffs, all the way down to 16th. Now, this doesn't really change from last year, because last year they were drafting 15th, they took Cole Caulfield in that spot, and he's a guy whom Canadiens fans just absolutely love. We spoke about this in the 16th overall trading video as well, but 16's a good pick. Like, you can get some very interesting and high-caliber talent players in this range, and going into the second and the third round of the draft, we have ourselves some very intriguing names that, if they were drafted last year, they probably would have been a lot higher up on the draft chart, because this 2020 draft is seen as a deeper, stronger draft than 2019. So, let's go over on the Twitter and talk about a few names that the Habs probably might be interested in, according to Mike Lalancette. This is a tweet from Marco D'Amigo. He says this: according to Lalancette, who is a TVA Sports hockey reporter, Trevor Timmins, the Montreal Canadiens assistant GM, really likes Rodion Amirov and Dawson Mercer. The Canadiens also hold Jakob Perreault in high esteem. Now, if you're out there saying, okay, I don't trust Mike Lalancette, I don't want to believe that it's Amirov, it's Mercer, and or Perreault whom the Canadiens may end up taking, well, Marco's kind of got you covered over here. Lalancette was apparently spot on last year, with the interest the Habs had in Cam York, one of the two players the Habs took out for dinner, with Cole Caulfield too. So, I want to touch on that a little bit first, because just taking a look at the source, that indeed is another thing as well that you have to consider, because Cam York is a guy whom the Canadiens, I remember this actually, did indeed have interest in. We made a video about this a year and a half ago, talking about the Canadiens potentially having interest in Cam York, and the willingness, apparently, to draft him 15th overall. Now, if it was actually the case here that last year when the Canadiens were doing their interviews and talking to the prospects, they ended up going out for dinner with York and with Caulfield, it makes all the sense in the world to me to believe that these were the two guys that they wanted. First off, they wouldn't have had the opportunity to draft Cam York because he went a pick earlier to the Philadelphia Flyers, 14th overall, and Cole Caulfield was eventually drafted by Montreal too, so you can kind of connect the dots there. So, even though we don't have any extended dinners going on here because, quarantine, lockdown, we gotta stay inside, right? Social distancing. Mike Lalancette is making his calls out right here. It's Rodion Amirov, Dawson Mercer, and Jakob Perreault. These are all guys who, honestly, I kind of see them being projected in this range. Rodion Amirov honestly could slip a little bit higher up in the draft in my opinion, but a lot of these names actually are similar to the ones that we talked about in the previous video. Now, the previous video, we spoke about the idea of trading 16th overall and the value attached to that, because when you take a look at some of the mock drafts and the rankings, taking a look at who exactly would be available at 16 according to projections is quite interesting. Rodion Amirov, let's start off with him. He's a guy who's projected 17th by Elite Prospects, 14th by Future Consideration, 16th by ISS. TSN and Craig Button have him at 19. McKean's has him at 25. He is the 5th best European skater by NHL Central Scouting. He's ranked 19th by TSN and Bob McKenzie, and a 16th consolidated ranking, taking the average of all of these. Honestly though, I said this in the previous video as well, I would not be surprised if Rodion Amirov squeaked in somewhere into the top 12, maybe even the top 10, because as a 19-year-old left-wing Russian player playing in the KHL, he currently has 5 points in 9 games played. Pretty good, right? Last season, he was in the MHL, 22 points, 17 games, 3 points in 5 games in the VHL, but Rodion Amirov is just a very smart, very skilled hockey player in general. When it comes to both areas of the ice, he plays really, really well. He knows what to do. His hockey IQ is very well developed at both ends of the ice, and his overall shiftiness, puck skills, his skating ability in tight, it's a very useful tool that he has. He's really shifty, he's really good with the puck, and he's a guy who definitely could become a very complementary piece in the NHL if he develops properly. As a number 1, number 2 left wing, he certainly has that ceiling in my opinion. It's just, whether or not he'll reach that is the other question. But Amirov is a guy who I definitely could see being a Habs target because the way he plays, the way he is able to assert himself at both ends of the ice does kind of mold itself to what I believe the Canadiens' playstyle actually looks for. But let's go over onto some of the other guys over here because Dawson Mercer is another name as well. He's ranked 15th by Elite Prospects, 13th by Considerations, 12th by ISS. Craig Button has him at 17, McKean's at 13, Consolidated ranking is number 12, and TSN and Bob McKenzie have him at 13. So, in terms of the projections, he's actually ranked a little bit higher here than Amirov, but Dawson Mercer does have quite a different skill set. He's a really well-rounded player. He's not really super amazing at one particular thing, but a lot of stuff that he does, two-way play, board play, setting up, playmaking play, goal-scoring play, offensive threat play, he's pretty good at most areas of the ice. He's very well-rounded. Which is kind of why he's a guy who eventually has been placed this far up in the rankings. In the QMJHL this past season, he suited up for 2 teams, the Drummondville Voltigeurs as well as the Chicoutimi Saguenay. If you take both teams and put them together, he had a total of 42 games played and 60 points. A pretty good step up from what he accomplished in Drummondville last season. If he's able to really develop his offensive side, then he could really become a strong offense driving forward, who also has a very good penalty kill side to him as well, because Mercer does a lot of things right. Next up, though, it's Jakob Perreault, who is actually ranked a little bit lower here when it comes to the actual rankings. 23rd by Elite Prospects, 23rd Future Considerations, ISS at 27, Craig Button has him at 40, so that's really far down. 28th by McKean, 17th by North American Skaters for NHL Central Scouting, 25th on the Consolidated Rankings, and 21st by TSN and Bob McKenzie. Now, the first thing you're going to notice is, whoa, this guy got 70 points in 57 games played, 39 goals too. Why is he all the way down here when he's outscoring the heck out of Amirov and Mercer? Well, it's because there are actually definable improvements, quote-unquote, that you can project onto Perreault's game. He's got a very good shot, and his puck skills, playmaking, they're both splendid. It's just some people would say that his season was actually not a reflection of how good he can be, because a lot of people would say that he actually has more in the tank, and it really comes across in the defensive zone. This is the kind of guy who, if you draft him, what you're drafting is an insanely raw, talented skill set that needs to be molded, shaped, and pushed into the direction that allows him to be not only an effective puck-driving offensive player, but somebody who is able to contribute and compete at that same level in his own zone too. Because Perreault, according to the scouts, doesn't really have a well-polished all-around game compared to how good we know he is at offense. So that's kind of why he's dropped down a little bit. A lot of people know that he is one of the most talented players in this draft, skill-wise, shot-wise, offensively speaking. But there's more to develop in his own zone, especially when compared to somebody like a Rodion Amirov or a Dawson Mercer, who both exhibit very strong defensive zone coverage. So these are 3 prospects, according to Lalanset, whom the Canadiens are apparently very interested in. If they don't end up trading the pick, like in the video we discussed a few days ago, would they take one of these 3 guys? If any of them are available, I honestly would make the pitch for either of them, especially Rodion Amirov, big fan of that guy. But we're just going to have to wait and see. In my opinion, though, Jakob Perreault is probably the least likely of these three, just because of the engagement and defensive zone issues that we talked about, and that doesn't really seem to mesh with what the Canadiens look for in prospects, in my opinion. But, of course, that's just my own thoughts over here. We're talking about what Lalonde said anyway, so it's pretty much his main idea as well. So, talk to me in the comments what you think about these three prospects. Would you want the Canadiens to draft any of them? And if not, who'd you want them to take instead? Let me know what you think down in the comments below, but for now, I hope you enjoyed this video. This is and bye.